pain and frustration surrounding Ferguson and similar events? What's at the root of all this mess that you see going on, especially, you know, what happened afterwards, the anger, the frustration, the debates? Like, what's at the root of all the pain and issues?
Yeah, I think some of that's kind of already been highlighted by answers, but I think that's an interesting question in light of, like, even the Department of Justice report. So you got the Department of Justice clarifying, based on their report, the Darren Wilson issue, and then also clarifying the issues of the Ferguson Police Department. And I think the response that you see coming from so many people, black and white, around the country, it's just been a response not so much whether it was, you know, I can't breathe, to, you know, the hands up signs and don't shoot. I think it wasn't just about that specific instance, but I think it touched on something for so many people that has gone on for so long. You know, injustice in so many ways, and not just whether it's police brutality, whether it's over-policing, but even beyond it, I think it's evolved to discussions about just race in general. And all the way to, you know, just some of the injustice that we see going on, all the way down to the incarceration rates in America. Almost 1 million young black men in jail. Almost 1 million. And just, you know, those percentages laid up against everything else. I think even like in the Justice Department report that talks about just the over-policing of Ferguson, like, that's not isolated, or at least I don't believe so. And I think we have data that proves that. And so I think at the root of the whole thing is this kind of frustration, this kind of pain that comes from either distrust, racial bias, that I think what Kellie spoke to the point where you, whether you're aware of it or not, sometimes you get to the point where you subconsciously are living hopelessly because you don't think things probably will change. Even though, you know, in the backdrop you have a black president, and, you know, a lot of people would think we could celebrate and move, but there's still plenty of issues too.
Charles?
You know, as a little boy playing outside, you would scrape your knees and a scab would grow. And the initial hurt was painful enough. But the pain when you bump your boo-boo is sometimes and oftentimes a more excruciating pain than the initial cut. And I think that's where a lot of the hurt and the anger and frustration comes from, is because as African Americans in this country, we all have the wounds and scabs. I mean, we could just have hours of us just sitting up here and letting you know all the bumps and bruises and scabs we've gotten from being minorities in a majority culture, even beyond the specific racial issues in our country, just what it means to not be the primary group of people. And so I think that would probably be it. It's like ripping off the scab again. I think another cause of a lot of the frustration is when people try so hard to say that race has nothing to do with it. That's frustrating for minorities who know, and then you're forced to try to explain. You're forced to try to explain why you're hurt and frustrated. I mean, can I have a lament moment? Can I have a Psalm 10, a Psalm 13 moment? You get frustrated when you're not allowed to be upset and angry.
I know that for the people in Ferguson, they were frustrated because they have been harassed for years. And shooting this young man, regardless of what he had done, in the street like that, and even regardless of whether his hands were up or he was advancing on the officer or not. I'm not saying that was right. I'm saying regardless of that, the people in Ferguson were fed up. They have been harassed, taxed, fined, targeted, jailed, lost jobs. Amanda was telling us of the story of a young woman who was planning to go into the military, 18 years old. Got a ticket, couldn't pay the ticket. They fined her, doubled the fine, and she ended up losing her opportunity to go into the Navy because now she had a record. People have lost their businesses. Parents have had to spend 2 days in jail because they've got ticket fines. And you've got a town that's 67% black, but 93, 97, 90% of the crime and offenses in the city were committed by only the black folks. What, 1 or 3% were white folks? And I went to school with white folks. Nobody was good. Nobody was good. They just got away with stuff. And the black kids, the black families never ever did. They were constantly watching. They were constantly waiting, ready to pounce. And so you shoot a young man in the street, in his neighborhood, for something that isn't immediately obvious. There was no weapon. And I saw a video of what was going on after he was shot, before it even broke on the news. My younger sister and nieces went to school with his mother, Mike Brown's mother, and the cell phones came out and people were recording the police coming and people coming in to see what was going on, and they were angry. They were immediately angry. And the way the police handled them and talked to them and told them to shut up, get back, and immediately shutting these people down in their community with this young man that they know that was shot by the police officer. And it was enough. They were angry, it was enough. They were mistreated, and it wasn't new. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back in devastating ways. And I think for the people in Ferguson, that's what happened. You harass us, you fine us, you tax us, you target us, and now you're killing us. No more. We're just not going to take this anymore. And they did what people have done historically throughout all time. They began to protest, and sometimes violently. And I think I get frustrated when people say, well, they're being violent, they're looting, they're doing this, they're doing that. And I just want to say, that's a reflection of what they felt has happened to them. They're doing what they have had no control of having happened to them. Right, wrong, indifferent. We can discuss all that later. But they have reached a boiling point, and they've had no voice, no advocate, no resources, no hearing for years. And they are tired, and they're going to take whatever they want at this point. Eric Gardner, same thing. You hear a man saying, I can't breathe. the only guy that got arrested was the fellow who recorded it. How does that happen? How do a people group continually be overlooked and oppressed by a system that's declared to protect them? How does that happen? And at some point, it's going to break badly. And that's what happened. And it's, I think, especially infuriating when you see you have a black president and a black attorney general and whatever else is out there, because you think we'll never be respected, we'll never be valued. It doesn't matter. If God's black, they'll still be mad. There's just no way we'll ever be seen as anything other than this. Folks you have to watch. Folks you can't trust. In a disproportionate way than our opposite people group. Because, the white kids in my school were selling drugs too. But nobody talked about that. And we had a race riot in my high school. And it was a real riot when I was in my junior year. And, I think we always talk about the angry black man, the angry black woman, and we kind of laugh. There's some truth to that. When you don't feel safe, when you don't feel heard, when you feel like you can do nothing right, ever. You can be respectful and quiet and still get arrested and slammed down onto the concrete or the police car. Why be nice? Why be safe? That's what happens. And I think that's what happened in Ferguson, and that's what people are reacting to. It's tough. As a believer, it's extraordinarily tough to have what my Christian discipleship says I should do and what my humanity says I should do don't jive. At least not at first. But I think that's what people are feeling.
I think everybody pretty much saying the same thing. It's history. It's the stuff that's already happened and it keeps happening over and over. And so when I answer that question, I felt like that's obvious. It's frustrating because the same thing keeps happening. And so I kind of answered this more so of my own personal frustrations. So when I think about things like this, like I homeschool my children. And so when I see something like this, I'm like, oh, now this has to change. What I teach has to change. Now I have to teach my children. I have to add to my curriculum for my children on how to respond to the world. But the funny thing is my children are both black and they're both white. And so I'd love to say, I ask myself, okay, well maybe they'll get by and I won't have to have this talk. And if I do have to have this talk, when will we have this talk? And the reality is, my children in this world are black children. And I need to teach them how to respond and how they will be viewed in this world as black children. And in our home, that creates frustration. It's frustrating for me to have to stop what I want to teach them, to know that this is something that I have to teach them, that I have to teach them those responses. And then it's, what do I teach them? Do I give them the same talk that my dad gave me some 20-something years ago? And is that talk the same? What's different about that talk? And how do we go about that? It creates frustration in our home when my husband comes to me frustrated and literally saying, Ranika, how do I raise a black son in this world? And I don't have the answer because I don't know. All I know is what I've been taught and how I've been able to respond to the world. And I do think there's a difference between black women and black men in this world. I think Charles probably got a different talk than me. It was probably a similar talk, but as a black man, I think that in a lot of ways, I think black men have it harder. So it's, how do I teach my little girl? How do I teach my son? How does my husband do that? I don't even know how to empower a white man to teach a black man how to live in this world. I don't know what that is. Like, what does that even mean? But that's something that we have to think about, and that's something that we constantly talk about. We constantly have these race conversations and how to do that. And you want to do those things in your flesh, but the frustrating part is we can't do that because we belong to the Lord Jesus. And so our responses have to be different. And so it's trying to navigate what I've been taught by my dad, what my dad was taught, what we've been taught through generations, and take that and say, but how do we respond as the Lord Jesus wants us to respond? And what is it that we teach our children? Which is just frustrating all around. The things that we thought we would never have to think about as a family, when these things come up, we know it's not something we can bypass, but it's something that we actually have to talk about head on. So the fact that our family is both black and white, but in this situation, the white part has no weight. It doesn't give us a pass. So